First, I know it does feel way too soon to be talking about the 2024 presidential election, but let me tell you, whether you like it or not, it is well and truly campaign season. Right now, it's shaping up to be a Trump and Biden rematch, mainly because too many people are hedging their bets to step up and back a long-shot candidate. But first, let's talk about Joe Biden this week. He tried to take a rebrand of one of the biggest liabilities of his tenure as president, the economy.
Well, look, you guys branded it. I didn't. I never called it Bidenomics, and so I was asked the question, why did I...
Your economics team is calling it Bidenomics.
No, wait, let's get it straight. First time we're hearing the Wall Street Journal, okay? I don't go around beating my chest Bidenomics. So the press started calling it Bidenomics. I like it. It's fine.
Okay, let's be clear. Bidenomics has, up until now, been something of an insult. It was first coined by the Wall Street Journal and conservatives to explain rampant inflation that's hit America over the last couple of years. Now, this is his big Bidenomics pitch.
I ran on the promise I was going to end this, and that I began to build an economy from the middle out and the bottom up. We're not going to continue down the trickle-down path as long as I'm president. This is the moment. We're finally going to make a break and move away from an economy that has existed in a fundamentally different direction. Here's the simple truth about trickle-down economics. It didn't represent the best of American capitalism, let alone America. It represented a moment where we walked away, and how many in this country, from how this country was built, how this city was built.
The US Bureau of Labor Statistics shows consumer goods are up 15% since Biden took office. Americans have way more credit card debt than at any other point in US history, almost $1 trillion. And the technical recession's about to feel really real, just in time for the 2024 presidential election. Not only is Biden trying to find the words to spin a bad story in the lead up to 2024, he's up against Donald Trump, whose biggest saving grace is that every American saw their 401k savings go up while he was in office, whether he actually had anything to do with it or not. If the economy isn't Joe Biden's biggest liability, his age certainly is, and it's becoming harder than ever to ignore. When leaving the White House ahead of what was supposed to be his big landmark speech on the economy in Chicago, the president stopped to take questions from reporters. It's there he confused Iraq with Ukraine.
It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq. He's losing the war at home. And he has become a bit of a pariah around the world. And it's not just NATO. It's not just the European Union. It's Japan. It's 40 nations.
Look, everyone makes mistakes. I know I certainly do. But the president did make the exact same mistake the night before. The White House released a transcript of remarks President Biden made at a private fundraiser at a benefactor's home in a swanky suburb just north of Washington, D.C. Now, the transcript reads, "Think about this. If anybody told you and my staff wasn't so sure either that we'd be able to bring all of Europe together in the onslaught on Iraq and get NATO to be completely united, I think they would have told you it's not likely." That looks an awful lot like advisors struck out Iraq and replaced it with Ukraine, suggesting the president didn't notice his same mistake the evening before either. Look, Joe Biden does have a well-documented stutter, but this isn't his stutter. This is not even close to being a one-off, and he is running for president again, so these questions will keep coming up. This is all while the president fronted up to answer questions from reporters, which he rarely does compared to previous presidents. But he did seem to show that there was visible marks on his face from some kind of mask. We're told it's a CPAP machine for sleep apnea, but it does raise another question. We have an 80-year-old president who would be 82 taking his second term and 86 when he leaves office. An ABC News Washington Post poll this week found 68% of Americans say Joe Biden is too old for another term. For the first time, Donald Trump's pulling ahead of Joe Biden in head-on-head polling. And that's on the Democrats. In politics, perception can be as powerful as reality. I hear all the time from DC insiders who tell me how switched on Joe Biden is, how he's so experienced and well across his brief. But next year, it's not up to anyone here inside the Beltway. You need to make that case to voters in Wisconsin, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and that's going to be a tough sell. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, it's Trump, Trump, Trump. CNN revealed the audio transcript of him bragging about his classified documents.
Well, with Milley, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him. Wow. We looked at some. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was him. All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look. Wait a minute. Let's see here.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Except it is like highly confidential, secret.
Look, we don't know from audio exactly what documents he was looking at, but the charges are as serious as they get: espionage and obstruction of justice. Never before have we had a candidate in the race who's been president, lost, trying again while potentially facing jail time, and so primed to win if you believe the polls. Meanwhile, his biggest competitor, Ron DeSantis, is hitting some interesting territory, pledging to abolish 4 government agencies.
So we would do education, we would do commerce, we do energy, and we would do IRS. And so if Congress will work with me on doing that, we'll be able to reduce the size and scope of government.
Look, that's one way to drive down DC house prices. But let me tell you one candidate I think everyone's sleeping on here. If you thought we were done with TV stars in the Oval Office, think again. Here's TV psychiatrist Dr. Phil talking to Bill Maher.
I'm launching my show in January of 24, election year. I intend to have a major impact on what happens. I think families in America are under attack. I think we've got to get rid of all of this noise and crap and get back to what matters. And I do intend to have an impact on that election.
You heard it here first. Bill Maher couldn't talk Dr. Phil into running over the hour-long interview, but Dr. Phil also didn't rule it out. But before we get to our panel, let's cover off one absolutely extraordinary moment from this week. We all watched with bated breath to see if Vladimir Putin was about to take a trip out the nearest window at the hand of his own squad of private mercenaries, forcing the United States into an awkward position of not looking like it was egging on the internal crisis of a nuclear adversary.
We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system. I also talked at length with President Zelensky of Ukraine. I'll be keeping in contact with him. I may be speaking to him later today, early tomorrow morning, to make sure we continue to remain on the same page.
Biden was talking to Russia in that moment as much as he was talking to House Republicans. Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene was among others posting clips like this. The Freedom Caucus in the House is pushing back more than ever on the billions being spent in Ukraine. At the same time, it was revealed the US lost $200 billion in fraudulent COVID support claims over the pandemic. Later on, we're going to check in with someone who knows how voters outside the DC bubble are feeling about where their taxpayer dollars are going.